Welcome to the Post Shift Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC. What is happening, Post Shift Podcasts? Welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. What do I say? I can start again. Welcome to Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. I was a little discombobulated right there. I'm really looking forward to today's episode. I look forward to everybody's episode. I've known Evelyn Chick for a really long time. I don't want to say how long, but a really long time, ever since she started bartending in Vancouver many years ago. I've obviously got older. She looks exactly the same. And so I'm very fortunate to have a sit down and chat with her today about modern entrepreneurship. Welcome, Evie. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Good. I know you're super busy right now. I really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day for a sit down. For the listeners who don't know you around the world, give us your back of a napkin introduction of yourself.
Oh boy, I feel like it's changed a lot since my last napkin bio with the Post Shift Podcast. But I'm Evelyn Chick. I'm a beverage expert who lives in Toronto. I'm a serial entrepreneur, TV personality on CTV's The Good Stuff with Mary Berg. Under my umbrella company, Evelyn Chick Projects, I have an event space, AMA, which is what I'm in right now. A cocktail, wine, and snack bar called Simple Things, a cocktail experience called Love of Cocktails, and a glassware line named Story. So I am
Not
everywhere. Yeah, with hospitality and beverage. A few things.
How did you get your start in the bartending world and cocktails?
So as Shawn mentioned, like we've known each other for years, and I started bartending when I was 18. That was the legal age that you can kind of like hold alcohol in Vancouver. And I started at a large corporation. So Cactus Club was my first hospitality job, and I kind of learned the chops of bartending, probably not shaking or stirring properly at all, but like combining things in a mixing glass there. And then I moved on to a little bar called Uva Wine Bar, eventually Granville Room, and kind of worked my way up into the cocktail realm. I think I started taking cocktail bartending seriously when I was around 21. Got the chance to go to the Bourbon Trail, eventually, moved to Toronto, won a global cocktail competition, and it kind of like spiraled from there. So I did start very well from the bottom.
Yeah. So, but bartending aside, like you are, as you said, a serial entrepreneur, which is really what I want to get into, because I think the transition from bartending to serial entrepreneur is not the easiest one in the world. Like just from bartending to entrepreneur, like from management and that sort of thing. How did you make that switch? How did you sort of take your career and what point were you like, you know what, I need more from my career, need more out of my life, and make that transition from where you could just be a bar owner or a bar manager or someone under someone else? What was the transition point for you where you went, yep, I'll go do it myself?
I think it kind of came out of necessity. So COVID kind of shook everyone to the core. And in the beginning of COVID, I was actually a beverage director for a large hospitality group. It was Donnelly Group back then and Free House Collective now. But I had the choice to like stay on as a beverage director and like continuously lay off my staff and train new staff and do the takeout thing, or go off on my own. So I started a sort of landing page called EvelynChickProjects.com, really just to like put up recipes, did a blog, and it was scary kind of just to go off and like try to be a content creator. That was when like people really started paying attention to drink recipes, paying attention to stuff you can make at home, because there was so much value in home entertainment. So that was the space that I started in. And I didn't necessarily think that I was going to build anything brick and mortar. But the demand came in which people wanted to get cocktail kits with my experiences that I offer. So I started Love of Cocktails, and it was in and around then that I was like, oh, I've created a business. And throughout the many talks that I bring around with my book on the tour that I've done in North America is really how to make that transition. And that transition can be short or long for a lot of people. For me, it was very quick because I needed to. So I always feel like entrepreneurship means that you have the daringness and the will to take risk calculatedly. And the moment that you do that, you are being an entrepreneur no matter what you're doing, whether or not it's service based, intellect based, or something that's physical.
What pushed you from like, because content creation in itself, and obviously the pandemic, the cocktail kits, what pushed you to make that change up to go to a brick and mortar store? Because content creation and those cocktail kits have been very popular, very lucrative. What was, and we all know as operators, brick and mortar is, if you could do anything else in the industry, sometimes brick and mortar is
Don't
like
do it.
the brick and mortar is like the last thing you could do. Like, there's a
Yeah.
massive lift before you go, I'm going to open my own place. Once you start getting traction on your brand, what was the switch to open Simple Things?
I think so, like a slow transition to opening a Simple Things, it was also accidental. And I really believe in taking leaps of faith on yourself in moments that require it. And what happened with Simple Things was that Love of Cocktails got so big that I needed a production space. So I found Ama, which is my event space. And I was like, eventually these experiences that I'm curating virtually will come in person. So I wanted something that I can host cocktail classes, bar schools, pop-ups. It became an incubator space for a lot of different chefs during the pandemic. The basement of that was for Love of Cocktails to essentially execute the syrups, the cocktail kits. I have a team doing it. It was like Santa's little helpers at some point. Um, but I was actually looking for a larger event venue because we keep getting requests for bigger and bigger experiences. And Simple Things kind of came up as a hush hush listing on the market. And it was only a 5-minute walk from Mama. And when I walked into that space, it was kind of everything that I've dreamt of, that I envisioned when I was going to open my own bar. It was a open concept kitchen. It was 2 different rooms. It was transitional. I could clearly see my vision. So I like went to the bank, got a deposit check, and was like, well, I guess I'm opening a bar. Anyone who knows me was like, I told them back 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I'm never opening a bar again. And here we are with a brick and mortar space. But I think it's because I had such a clear vision as to what I wanted the bar to be. And it was the right place at the right time.
And for the people who don't know what Simple Things is, give us a quick rundown, because it is a very interesting, like, it transitions throughout the day, different styles during the day. Like every day, it's completely always in flux through the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, so Simple Things is an all-day cocktail, wine, and snack bar, and I feel like in our cocktail, our very small cocktail community and world, there isn't a lot of room for natural wines and like food, and yes, like those things can happen simultaneously, but it's never really like curated in a way where it's really well thought of. So Simple Things during the day serves Italian comfort food. So it's like grab and go sandos, really nice handmade pasta, and spritzy cocktails like Negronis, stuff like that. And we have a little cocktail hour, and it transitions to an Asian snack bar at night where the cocktails are more intricate. There's more alternative spirit bases, a little bit more esoteric flavors. So it kind of came from a reaction to how people eat and drink differently when they go out. Rarely do we, as like a hospitality industry, go and like really like eat a 3-course meal
Mhm.
often, and like you want to share experiences, you want to like have a little bit here and then pop onto the next spot and have a little bit there. So Simple Things really is sort of a all-encompassing welcoming space. For those of you who haven't been, it's really colorful, it's super bright, polar opposite of my apartment, my event space, anything that I would dream of opening. But I always say that you can't not be happy there, because even to the thought of like rounding the corners of every table, it really is a space where everyone feels welcome. And no matter what you're drinking or what you're eating, it's the experience that matters. And we're really fortunate to have had quite a list of accolades since we've opened 2 years ago. So it really is something special. And that's why I went for it.
Have you always had like natural business acumen? Like as bartenders, we're very passion driven sort of businesses. Even when you get into management, like culture and cocktail creation is still front of brain, and then business costings, that sort of things back of brain. Have you always been a natural business minded person, or was that a challenge for you to click over from, okay, well, I'm very passionate about what I want to do. Can I make money from it, to continue being passionate on what I do?
So I always struggled with that in the beginning, and then you kind of find ways to improve yourself on the business side of things. I think I come from a little bit of a different background because of my corporate background. So like you're always made to think about costing whenever you're doing anything. So on the operation sides of things, because I've opened so many bars from scratch, I know in a sense what your bottom line is, what your budgets need to be. So I think like I'm trained to be business sensed, but I'm definitely very, very much a creative person. That always is what drives what I love to do. And I feel like I fill those pockets with creating cocktails for the show, or creating cocktails for my book, or creating cocktails for brands. So I'm really lucky in a sense where I've carved out a path for myself to be both, but I always have to tether. So sometimes when I'm having like a creative block, I almost need to go do the opposite extreme and just look at
Mm.
spreadsheets for 6 hours. So you kind of just have to keep finding out what your weaknesses are in both and then keep improving on it. So not to say that like if you're a creative you can't be a business person. I think you might just have to work harder on that aspect.
So as a someone who has got a very strong personal brand and you've been building that for a number of years, what sort of advice do you give to bartenders when they're trying to make that leap from being attached to their venue and sort of building their brand within a venue to stepping out and building a personal brand that can then be attached to other things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I get asked that a lot by younger bartenders. I think a space that you work at is essentially a space that you represent. Like you do represent that space. If you're going to a cocktail competition, they often ask you, where do you work? All that stuff. Because that's a portion in which it doesn't carve out your identity, but it helps your growth and the direction in which you become as a bartender, as a bar manager, whatnot. So for your personal brand, I think the ultimate tip is just to be authentic. Like you really can't fake your authenticity because people smell it from a mile away, and it's really hard to kind of be good at something if you continuously have to work on becoming a certain persona. And I always say, like, obviously, I'm a TV personality. The TV me is like the extreme, like, broken down version of myself. It's almost like the little bit that I give the public.
Hmm.
And the people who are lucky enough to be in my circle, like, really know the real me. So when you're building a personal brand, it's really important to identify what you want to give to that particular project, whether or not it's representing the bar or representing yourself. And representation matters, and it's really important to whoever audience you are speaking to or you're targeting to. So sticking to kind of who you are as a person, and like building little, I guess like building little bits of character around like what you're doing at the time is important as well. So yeah, authenticity, big time.
So with you started the love of cocktails during the pandemic, and obviously everything was digital, everything was content creation, TikTok and Instagram and social media was massive. How has everything sort of shifted for you post pandemic? I don't want to even really talk about the pandemic because we all have done that a million times over.
Yeah.
How have things shifted, and how have you adjusted stuff? Because like I know a lot of the digital side of things sort of broke a lot of businesses that did the cocktail classes digitally and stuff like that. They didn't sort of didn't continue to resonate with the client, with the guest, and with the market. How have you adjusted as you've gone through from the pandemic stuff that really worked in the pandemic? Is it still working for you now?
I guess there's a few different aspects of that, because Love of Cocktails as a company now kind of evolved into a cocktail experience company. So like anything that is cocktail related, I hope that people call on Love of Cocktails. So that brand I've sort of built separately, and that's good. A good segue from the branding question as well, because I have my own personal brand that I build that's like Evelyn Chick, and then I have Love of Cocktails, which is a very consumer focused, extremely approachable way of like looking at cocktails. And if people looked at Love of Cocktails, they don't necessarily need to associate it with me,
Hmm.
because like a lot of my stuff is very calculated, maybe sometimes like extremely unique in a way where it's like just too far-fetched for the regular folk. So for Love of Cocktails, how I translated that experience is to bring everything in person. So we still do twice a month open cocktail classes that sells out right away. We do a ton of cocktail experiences for different brands. We collaborate a lot with people, especially in the food industry. Because I feel like oftentimes it's always the back of house, front of house thing. Like I love
Hmm.
culinary partnerships because the way how we can bring that, really like elitist realm to regular consumers is so special by like bringing it together and making it very accessible. So that translates in the sort of like personal experience way. And then outside of that, corporate gifting is still a huge thing. There are a lot of customizations that we do for our corporate clients. So say, for example, we just had a massive corporate client in Vancouver actually is closing this construction project. And they really wanted a custom cocktail done for them with this color, but they need it shelf stable. So that's where my like really nerdy high end stuff comes, because I know stabilization, I know how to pasteurize things, I know how things travel. So a lot of it is just kind of growing from what you started and finding a team to execute.
So you started recently. So we've talked about simple things, talked about love cocktails. The glassware. What was the driver behind starting your own glassware company? Because I'm not going to. There's a lot of glassware on the market already. What was like the gap that you were just like, you know what, I need to do this myself?
Everyone, like, I guess there's always a gap in glassware for cocktail bars. It comes from particularity, and like, I feel like I'm a very, I have a lot of energy as a person. And sometimes my energy is better spent creating something for others who I know is going to use it very well. So there's always, when you open a bar, you like flip through the catalogs, you like look at all these beautiful glasses, and you spend, like $7 to $15 or whatnot on it, $30 sometimes. I recently visited the bar and was like, wow, this glass is amazing. They're like, yeah, it's $30. I'm like, in my brain, I'm like breakage, trying to
Yeah,
calculate my, like
glassware is
my
broken. As soon as you buy glassware is broken.
it's
Like,
broken. Yeah. So there really is no, like, I wouldn't say no. There really is very few like cocktail ready glasses that it aren't very aren't too fragile, let's just
mhm.
say. Especially with a ton of washes through the glass washer. So I wanted to create a line that people can open a bar with. So there's only 4 SKUs right now. We're going to grow. There's an all-purpose wine glass that's designed for wine, for sherries, for sakes, for any type of wine pours, and it'll look good because I think about wash line. It's good for spritzes, so a cold draft cube can fit into it. So every glass is very well thought of in the lens of a cocktail maker, but also in a lens of, say, a som and someone who uses it at home. There's a rocks glass that's a double rocks. There's a Collins glass and a cocktail glass. So it's only 4 glasses. So if any bar was like, I want to open a cocktail bar, those 4 glasses really
Mhm.
are the only things you need. So I call it our baseline glassware. Um, and I wanted to create that because I had such struggles opening bars, trying to find glassware that A, matches, secondly, doesn't break the moment you breathe on it, and third, like fits under the washer.
Mhm.
Like that's really it. It was very simple. So because I started Love of Cocktails from scratch, I was like, I can do this. Like why can't? So my life partner Justin actually like studied. He's very tech savvy, so he studied how to essentially like 3D design a glass, and we found a glassware supplier and we shipped it over, and like 2 years later we got our prototypes, and then the prototypes came, and then really quickly I'm selling wholesale glassware to like large restaurant groups. I'm like, what? It grew really fast. I was not shocked, but I was surprised.
So with you said you've got lots of energy, you've obviously got tons of projects and the like. How do you deal with your personal work life balance? Because it's something that I think every entrepreneur struggles with, that work life balance.
Yeah.
I think sometimes outside looking in, people think you're either working too much or you feel like you're not working enough. And I always subscribe to my own personal definition of work life balance. How do you deal with it on a personal level with work life? Because obviously you have a partner, I have a family. How do you make sure that your work life balance is working for you?
That's a great question because definitely it has to make sense for you. And a lot of folks are going to, look at your social media and know that you're doing a lot of things. And like, I'm gonna be honest, like my work-life balance is rarely balanced. However, I do make the effort because my life partner is also now my business partner in certain things, right? So like we have to carve out time to ensure that we're not talking business between these hours at this day. And it sounds very, type A and crazy where you schedule
Mhm.
in time to spend with each other. But if that works for you, then that's really important. We make sure to have our routines where I take the dogs out for a walk and we leave our phones at home and we don't look at them. We don't answer emails until a certain time, or we have our dead cutoffs for talking about work. So it's little adjustments that work for yourself. And to be honest, I'm still trying, like, especially at times when companies grow, that's when your personal life completely goes
Mhm.
into shambles. And you have to recognize that. And it doesn't mean that it's failure at the time. It just means that you have to take a step back and really take a breather and reevaluate your priorities. Do you need to go to the third event that's thrown by the bartending community that week? Like maybe not, you know? And there's a balance too, because as someone who is a leader in the industry, I want to show up for things. I want to support, I want to be a part of the community. But you owe it to yourself to kind of figure out your priorities at the time. And people won't understand if you can't show up for things. And that was what I really struggled with in the beginning, where I wanted to go for everything. I'm like, I got to
Mhm.
be there. I got to be there for my kids. I got to be there, my bar kids, not actual kids. Um, but yeah, I think it's just like drawing boundaries and setting them for yourselves and making sure that those are clear to others as well. Just because you're free doesn't mean you're available.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. I talked to a guy who actually does like productivity, and he said that it's not a bad thing to schedule time as if it was a meeting with your partner, your family,
Hmm.
whatever, because then you usually adhere to it. If you don't schedule it, if especially if you're type A, if you don't schedule it, you'll just fly through and you'll just keep working. But if you say hard
Yeah.
and fast, 3:30, I'm going to go for a walk with the dog and hang out with my partner, like it seems really weird because people think it needs to be organic, but as long as you hard and fast, if you're a type A person, you're like, okay, no, I got to stop and step back and go do that.
Yeah. And it needs to work for you too, right? If like you don't function that way, then that's totally fine. And you find your type of balance. Like a lot of people who I know, they like have their like they have to have their morning coffee and then they do
Mhm.
certain things. I was like, those little things are important because you don't realize how much structure it creates for your life.
So you tend to like all the things we talk about. You've innovated simple things as a this venue in flux, the glassware, the love cocktails. How do you see innovation in your business? Do you continue to look at trends and see what's coming down the pipeline? Are you so busy that you're sort of focusing so much on business, or are you still looking at the ecosystem around you about innovation in business, innovation in the cocktail community, innovation in the beverage industry? Are you constantly looking at trends and seeing what's coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I definitely think that you have to keep with the times and understand like the customer demands. Otherwise, like you're not growing, you're just kind of like maintaining. And that's how I kind of grew to a lot of different like business acumens as well, is because I constantly look for what people desire and the next step of what I want to move my company towards. So you always have to be innovating and you always have to be keeping track of what's relevant, what's not anymore. Am I hopping on the newest cocktail trend all the time? No, because I know that, like fashion, like everything else, things come and go. So, what I'm trying to establish with Evelyn Chick projects or ECP is like create sort of different anchors that will become legacy. So like I'm trying to find my own classics. I'm trying to reinvent what that looks like. I'm trying to figure out what a new style of company looks like. And I haven't talked about it yet, but like most of my company are run by female management. And I try to save a lot of space for people who are ex hospitality, who are looking for something different to do that isn't necessarily like the next step in bartending or the next steps of
Mhm.
service. And I think that's innovation alone, just by thinking about not the newest thing that you can create, but like what the next step is in terms of people reacting in society. Like what does that look like? What does that landscape look like next? So I think in terms of innovation, like I'm always looking forward and seeing how much more I can grow in terms of like diversity and inclusivity. But in terms of cocktails, like, of course, I'm always looking for the next big thing, but I'm never the person who's going to go out and be like, wow, the new Spin Sol 4.0 came out. I'm going to try that because I think that no longer is one of my anchors. And if it is for your bar, that's amazing. So, like, keep on that because that's your identity, right? So, I think it's funny because you know me as like you've known me for so long, and a huge part of my bartending career is focused on innovating in cocktails, and
Mhm.
now I feel like I'm just doing the other side of it.
So with that being said, like you're obviously an industry leader. You're mentoring kids. You're traveling around with the book, and doing seminars on entrepreneur and stuff like that. What's your philosophy behind leadership and mentorship in the industry?
I think it is something that is constantly evolving. I believe hugely in peer mentorship. And I think leadership is something that essentially is a person that you identify or a group that you identify and you take information from and you find leadership in certain groups that you feel comfortable with. Mentorship is a two-way street in which it's a huge like give and take process. And with myself, and I before this podcast, I like counted how many staff I have now. And I think I'm up to like 20, which is crazy for someone who like solely owns all her businesses, is self-funded, and there's like 4 venues, right? Um, but the biggest thing that I learned from corporate is everyone kind of goes their own path within your structure. And you either foster a community of growth within your company and create a culture in which they can make mistakes and have the autonomy to make decisions, and you're sort of just the guiding light, like the safety net underneath them, and you allow for them to kind of flourish on their own rather than having such a rigid structure as to this is the next step you grow, these are the particular roles that you need to fulfill, these are the tasks. I think this method has kept me a lot of staff. I think like staff retention is a huge topic right now everywhere. And I think there is a lacking of that type of mentorship over leadership in a lot of just bars and restaurants, or in a lot of company structures as well, because you're always working for someone, but you're never working with someone. And I feel like because I was corporate for so long and I disliked that portion of corporate, climbing the ladder, like working that 9 to 5 or 9 to 12 or whatnot, and trying to fit into this mold that's supposed to be your role, have taught me not to do that with my company. And there are a lot of people within my team who's grown significantly because of this change. And I think there's a lot of leaders in the industry that also advocate for this type of peer mentorship and this type of work environment and this type of cultural shift, because the like, old chef yelling at people, like that doesn't go anymore, especially when most of the folks you hire are going to be Gen Z. And because Gen Z has a more kind of like softer, like sensitive edge to them, you need to roll with the times,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I've actually next week's episode for the post shift shot is all about aligning the for and with, like
Yeah.
employers and leaders using you work with me or I work with you instead of you work for me, is like literally an episode next week to talk about, like, change up the verbiage just so that people understand, like, you get a lot more from your staff if you work with them instead of looking at them, they work for you.
Yeah.
So what's your advice for bartenders who are looking at that next step? Because I think you've got a very diverse portfolio of things you've got into. I think a lot of times bartenders or bar managers get into a position where they're like, the next obvious step for me in my life is owning my own place. But there is a whole
Right.
myriad of things in the hospitality industry that you can do without actually opening your own venue. What's your advice for entrepreneurs looking at taking that next step, or ownership, or that sort of thing? What's your best piece of advice?
I have a lot of advice to give for that, but I think my best piece of advice is like, just because someone said that that should be your next step doesn't mean it has to be. And I feel like I fell into that bracket when I was transitioning and moving to Toronto, is that the next step, obviously, after bartending, when you become your head bartender or you become more senior in your workspace, you become a bar manager. And then after that, it's either like at the time, either brand ambassadorship or owning a bar. And kudos to those folks who can do brand ambassadorship, because it's really hard work. Like, you travel a lot, you constantly have to be on, you're advocating for something that's not you personally, and you throw yourself into it, and you have to like consistently kind of create an environment where you're selling this product, but like organically. It's like I think that's so great. That's not me at all. I'd be a terrible brand ambassador, because I need my like moments to just be like, I don't talk to anybody. And I'm sure brand ambassadors do too, but I need a lot of that. But I think that when you look outside of the box a little bit and figure out what you truly are passionate about, you know, the question that people ask where they're like, what do you love about bartending? And everyone's like, the people, or
Mhm.
fuck, whatever. Like, you know, like, sure, of course, but like, break it down. Like, what is it that you really love about it? I have a slide that I bring on the talk that I bring across North America. It's just like there's four corners: what you love to do, what you hate to do, what you're good at doing, what you're bad at doing. If you find something that you love to do that you're good at, that's great, continue doing it. But if you find something that you love to do that you're not so great at, if you continue working on that sort of parallel, you find something that's really unique within the bartending community or the hospitality community, where brands are constantly looking for people to either create cocktails, speak on hospitality. There's tons of stuff that you can do with consultancy. There's a lot of things that you can create, whether or not it be organic content for brands, content for yourself, whatever it is. The world is really opened up for people
Mhm.
who make drinks. So if it's design that you love, then if it's like really like dialing into creating cocktails that you love, you don't necessarily have to open a bar to do that. There's like tons of people looking for recipes all the time. And that's when like ECP really started becoming a business, is when people are like, oh, you're not doing much, but I know you make good drinks. So like, can you make a custom cocktail for this particular activation that we're doing for a brand? And they kind of like spiraled from there. But I think it's really dialing in on what you like about your job. Like, what is it? You know, if it's operations, then yeah, like it kind of makes sense for you to open
Mhm.
something because you love the back of house stuff. You love the numbers. You love doing all the work that will help perpetuate something that's really special on the other side. But you need to figure it out first.
Do you think entrepreneurship's not just for is not for everyone? Sometimes the world of entrepreneurship is very glossy outside looking in, as you were saying about like social media, and brand ambassadors are a perfect example. Like brand ambassadors always looks like Dave Mitten's having the best time ever, except he had to do 3 cities in 4 days over the whole East Coast, and you're
Yeah.
just in airports and hotels most of the time. Do you think people look at entrepreneurship as a breeding ground for independence, where they could find a job, like you said, maybe it doesn't fit for everybody, but like beverage director for a big group, like the Free House Collective, what it is now. Do you think people can get caught up in entrepreneurship being very glossy and glamorous?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people, you know, there's a TikTok. I don't TikTok, but people send me these things all the time. The TikTok that goes what it looks like to be a bar owner, and it's like this person strolling in, someone handing them a coffee, they take off their sunglasses. And in reality, it's just like carrying 19 different Cambros and shit's falling everywhere. Um, it's not glamorous at all. Like you are really grinding. And the thing about entrepreneurship that people don't understand is that if you don't grind and you don't hustle, you don't work, things don't come to you. Like no one's
Mhm.
going to be like, you're doing such great things, let me present you these opportunities. It's not like that. Like you go out, you knock on doors, you smash down doors, you break ceilings to make things happen, especially someone who's like female and minority. It's a lot of things that you have to think about on the daily to navigate how to become an entrepreneur, because it's also, like I mentioned before, a lot of risk taking. So if you're not a risk taker, maybe being an entrepreneur is not the thing right
Mhm.
now. And it doesn't, if you're not an entrepreneur, it doesn't mean that you're not doing well. It just means that you've chosen another path. I know a lot of people who have really successfully become this like corporate giant. That's
Mhm.
amazing. And that's good for them because they have different goals than I do. So I don't I don't want children. Like I don't need to start a family anytime soon. I'm not looking to buy a house. So in terms of my personal life goals, it aligns with entrepreneurship because I can make decisions like this and it affects only a very small amount of people. And that's another thing too. It's if you think about the consequences of making really big decisions like that, how does it affect your personal life? And that goes back to life, work life balance, right? If
Mhm.
you need to like purchase a business and really work on it, are you going to see your partner? Are you going to be able to like financially hold up your side of things? Like, so yeah, like
Are you
I
going to be
think
happy?
entrepreneurship is definitely, are you going to be happy? Yeah. Like there's a lot of different factors. Like, is this going to like so shake up your nervous system to a point where you can't handle it? You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot. So it's definitely like a weird, large mountain that we all decided
Hmm.
to start climbing out of nowhere.
So what's happening with Simple Things right now? You're closed for a couple of weeks to do a refresh and a renovation. What's the plan for you for the next 6 months?
Yes. So Simple Things coming up to its third year in business. So we have our 2-year anniversary on the 18th of September. And it's always been a space where it's very like adaptable to what's happening in the now, and it's always a space to build community and kind of test out new talents. So we're shaking up the day and nighttime concept a little bit. During the day, responding to the neighborhood, it's turning into more like a sando takeout, still
Hmm.
Italian fresh bread concept. But we're finding that a lot of folks don't have a lot of time to like sit down and have lunch and stuff anymore. So there's going to be lots of Sandos to go. All our bottled cocktails are beautiful, including this like truffle Negroni that you can just grab back to your office party, to your apartment if you'd
I
like.
want to
Like
try. I
for
want to truffle Negroni at lunch.
right, it's it's so good. So that's just like easy takeout centric. You can still dine in house, but we've like installed computer plugs. So if you need to like work and
Mm.
eat lunch, you can do that as well. That's a huge thing that came out of the pandemic is like the work at home
The remote workers,
sort
yeah.
of realm. Yeah, the remote worker. So I want to create a space during the day where people feel comfortable opening their computer because it's not so specific, right? Like I'm not creating
Hmm.
a vibe for you. You want to have nice things, you want to work in your computer, maybe read a book. Like that's your all-encompassing welcoming space for Simple Things. At night, we're switching up the concept, still keeping the Asian snack bar kind of ideology, but it's focused on really snacky foods, handhelds, open fire grill, a tasting menu, and really bringing up the wine service. And what I really love about it is I'm injecting a community piece within our programming. So once every month, the first Monday of every month, we're inviting an external chef paired with an external bartender, and they're going to do a pop-up. They take over Simple Things for a day, and we keep one of the menu items as a feature for the rest of the month.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's always been a space where, you know, the nighttime concept constantly changes. Different chefs come in, they do the menu, but it almost feels like a space that's a constant pop-up,
Hmm.
but it's like a structured pop-up. And you know how pop-ups can sometimes be chaotic because there's no like
Yeah.
continuity in service. And that's what I want to focus on. Like Simple Things, doesn't matter what you're drinking, eating, whatever. The service is always excellent. The vibe is immaculate. And the rest of it is just stuff that we put in front of you.
Have you got any other big projects coming down the pipeline for the next 6 or 12 months that you can talk about?
Yeah. Yes. So I started a food festival this summer because I'm bored, clearly. It's called Feasty, and we just trademarked it, which is great. So we're bringing up our second year of Feasty next summer, coming July 2025, probably June, July. And it is a food and drink festival that focuses on highlighting local BIPOC and female talents. So it's all like vendors that we curated locally, and it feels like a very sort of like open, like Brooklyn flea market kind of vibe with
Mhm.
good music, good food. And I think every project that I do from now till I guess the end of time is really about like bringing those two elements together, creating an experience that people feel like is approachable. And I think that probably is all the projects that I have coming down the pipeline. I have another one that I can't talk about yet, but it's in the works. But I think in the next couple months, people will be able to see.
Nice. So we're going to get into the 5 questions that make you reflect on everything. What is the one lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry forward in your life?
What is the one perspective? I think that understanding, oh, I think self-awareness, like understanding where you are in the realm of your community, in the realm of society is really important. And I think that it took me a while to be self-aware. Because previously I think I've done a lot in my career and in my personal life as a people pleaser to please people.
Hmm.
Whereas I realized that more and more you do that, you don't save space and grace for yourself. And to be someone as high functioning as myself, or want to be as successful as I can be, you have to be extremely self-aware. And that means understanding where your emotional, physical, and mental capacity is and will be, and also understanding the consequences of your actions to others. So like self-awareness is a huge thing that I've learned that I think will carry through pretty well and pretty far in my life.
That's a good one. Self-awareness is sometimes tough, especially in the hospitality industry. As you said, you were a people pleaser. I think that's what most of us are in the hospitality industry, and we don't leave a lot of stuff for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's yeah. If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
One last piece of advice is never underestimate what you can do. I think as a hospitality individual, you're constantly kind of boxed into these roles in which you need to fulfill. And a lot of folks who approach me who are younger entrepreneurs or younger hospitality folks are like, well, I don't know if I can. And when I say, but how would you know if you didn't? And it's such a simple kind of switch in mentality where everything really is possible if you want to do it. If you don't want to do it and you're not good at doing it, then that's probably not something you should work on. But I think like underestimating the possibility of what you can do is huge, huge, huge. So never underestimate your self-worth or what you think you can accomplish.
I always live by a rule: anything is possible. Impossible just takes a little longer.
Yeah.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you understood earlier in life?
That nothing comes for free. I mean, no, like I actually, this is a piece of advice that I give to a lot of younger bartenders because I did that in my 20s. We made a lot of money back then. You and I know, like the money is just not the same anymore. But like back when I was doing high volume, I was like in, clubs and lounges and stuff. I spent all that money. I was like, live hard, die young. Like that mentality was so fun back then. But I never really like took a hold of my finances until I was in my early to mid 20s, which is quite late. But it's never too early to begin thinking about that. I still have people come to me being like, how much tips should I report again? I was like, I've known that you've been in this industry for at least 4 years. What do you mean? Like, you just figure that shit out. So I think it's just like thinking about where you are in terms of your finances, not because it's something that is responsible to do, but it kind of gives you a lot of freedom to do things that you want to do in a later date, whether or not it be investing in a bar or like, purchasing equipment for content creation and stuff. And that is weird because people are like, money doesn't buy you happiness, but it gives you a sense of security because you never have to worry that like your next paycheck is the only paycheck that you're going to live on. And that ties hugely into entrepreneurship as well, because your cash flow is up and down, up and down, up and down all the time. There are months that I look at my bank statement, I was like, wow, I'm broke. But I understand that like things are coming in and you need to take risks. And I wish that I knew that earlier, where I didn't need to fork out so much of my savings to put my own first capital into something. I could have had a little bit of a cushion. And this is just like real stuff that no one talks about. I feel like in the industry, no one talks about money, but I think everyone should, because that's really important. It's your livelihood, right? Like it's what is going to help you like grow in certain ways and help you start a family if you want.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
Yes, as a young bartender, um, as someone who's type A and a young bartender, I was very like ultra focused on winning something. I had to like have all these accolades, be on these lists and stuff. And I thought that was sort of the meaning of success when you've been on all this stuff. Now that I've been on all these things, it really isn't. I think success is watching, to me at least, this is a very personal definition of success, is watching your concept, your vision being carried out by others. And well, and better than you could ever imagine. And I think that the measure of success really isn't so personal for me, is watching the environment that I've built being enjoyed by others, watching the structure that I've built within my company um, be successful with the team that's within them, building a culture that people are happy about, that are proud to talk about. That's success for me.
Yeah, I think as a young bartender, you always think, oh, if I win this or I get this list, everything's going to change. And
Yeah.
then when it doesn't like crazy change, you're like, you get this massive high and then a massive low afterwards because you're like, oh,
Yeah.
like I'm going to win this award or win this competition. And then everything in my life will be different. And it doesn't usually work
Yeah.
out that way.
It's weird, right? Like it's funny because I actually had a specific like incident in, someone approaching me about that. And they're like, wow, when you won like Beefeater Globals in 2015, like your whole world changed, right? And I was like, well, yeah, but like you still have to work on
Yeah.
making your world change. Just because you have the title doesn't mean that, again, people are going to come hand you things on a silver platter. You still have to put yourself out there. And like I think there's a lot of, again, self-awareness that you have to understand that that isn't the be all end all, because that doesn't define you. That just defines that moment that you experience.
Mm-hmm. What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
Oh my goodness.
I told you there were deep questions.
Some deep questions. Yeah, I think my legacy really will be changing how, or what I want my legacy to be is changing how people view food and drink in the like public eye. Um, a lot of my career and what brought me to who I am now is the cocktail world, and I love it, but I hate it sometimes because it's so inaccessible. It's being like put on this pedestal, and I feel like it's becoming a little bit better now. But what I want to create is finding different kinds of community and like infiltrating in with the realm of creating drinks, with the realm of
Mm-hmm.
creation. And I think that what I want to leave people with is just like really amazing experiences that my team, no matter how it is, virtually, in person, whatever method it might be delivered, really great memories, really great experiences. And that could be from anything. It could be from a gift. It could be from a cocktail that they had at my bar. It could be, like opening a book and I signed it specifically for them. It
Mm-hmm.
could be from my team giving them the best wedding ever. Like, it doesn't matter. I think that it has to be it has to be more approachable, much more understood. And that way, yeah, you find a larger reach, and you find that you connect with a lot more people.
Thank you so much. I know that you're busy, and I know that even like I think 10 minutes before we were going to go, and you're like, a pallet just arrived, and I have to do this before we can do this the podcast. Can we do it a little bit late? So I really appreciate. I know you're very, very busy right now, and I'm just blown away with everything you've done, because I can't remember what year it was. It was like 20. It was when like peak pandemic, and I remember you giving me a call and having a chat just about like consulting and doing the entrepreneur thing, and I gave you a hopefully decent advice, and then
You did, clearly.
just all the stuff you've achieved over the last couple of years has just been absolutely amazing. So I really appreciate you sitting down and doing this with me.
Thank you. I appreciate having me on. And this is so great. You've done so many episodes. Like, wow.
Yeah, it was a big, I went to Tails, and I went to a couple of seminars with some good friends, and there was a click at a Shawn Finter seminar I said in his episode that like was like, I think it's been 2.5 years since I did the podcast. I need to bring it back and up my game again. I felt like there was still gas in the tank. So I wanted to bring back some of the stuff I was doing, and the podcast was obviously something that was big for me.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate this. I think a lot of folks who are watching or listening will take a lot from all your episodes too. I've been watching.
Well, thanks so very much, Evelyn. I'll let you get back to work today.
Thank you so much.
I'll chat to you real soon. Bye.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up, and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.